Now I'll just take you through the process of servicing my aquarium. It is a very, very easy tank to service. This is a 4-foot Starfire glass aquarium. It's got a LED slim light on it. It's got Aquael heaters and filters on it. And the plants are growing a little bit crazy. It's got some really nice platies, including this male one that's sort of my favorite at the moment. And it's got some JBL plant substrate at the bottom. And probably once a month I do a little bit of maintenance on this tank. It's very, very, very low maintenance and very easy to do. I'll go through the process with you right now. Now the first thing I'll do before I do anything to the tank is just top it up with water. Now the reason why I top it up with water is that the water will have evaporated, and I do like to keep an eye on particularly the GH level of the water. And if I start doing a water change and I don't top up the water first, then my GH level will tend to accumulate. If I top up the water before I start the water change, then the salts and so forth will tend to be a little bit more stable. So that water, it's filtered water, so it's best if you top up with RO water. A lot of the time I actually don't. A lot of the time I'll just put a bit of water ager in it, and Bob's your uncle. So the next thing I tend to do is just get a algae cleaner. There are various ones that I use, but just basically just going over the glass and just rubbing this over with this blade and just making sure that the glass is a little bit clean. It's a very simple process, and it's one of those things that if you're doing it regularly, you'll find that it's not a hard job. On the other hand, if you haven't done it for a while, then the algae does tend to get a little bit more stubborn. Now, because my plants are really starting to overgrow, I got myself some Aquael trimming scissors, and these will be quite handy for just going and trimming my plants. Because if you're going to have this sort of mud substrate, the idea is to have roots all the way through the substrate. So it's good to have a good cover of plants, and at the moment these are a little bit overgrown. So what I'm going to do is go and give them a little bit of a trim, and then I'll start replanting the stems again to make sure I've got a good cover of plants to ensure that I've got plenty of roots to use up the nutrients from the mud substrate. So when you're buying tools, the quality of the tool is very much how long the tool is likely to last. If you buy cheap tools, they end up rusting and they don't last long. So what I'm going to do now is just go through and just give a lot of my plants a little bit of a trim, like this. When you first give it a bit of a trim, it very much looks like you gave it a trim. But very quickly, those plants will grow back in again, and it will look like you never even trimmed them. So we just go and lob the top off a lot of them, like that. So very, very simple process. And you'll notice that the plants all then float to the top. Then once the plants have floated to the top, then I'll just get my little Aquael tongs, and which I will just go and replant them again. It's often good to have done the glass first, because doing this will often make the water clarity a bit less. So you really need tools to do this sort of job. Otherwise it's all just too difficult. And as with anything, if you're doing anything that's too difficult, then you won't tend to do it. And that's when all hell breaks loose. So just go. So once I'm finished planting these, then what I'll do next is go and just twirl that around the algae and stuff. Because one of the best things about algae is that when you get algae in your aquarium, if you just get yourself a bit of tongs, and then what you do is twirl the algae around the tong, and then just pull it out. And that way you're removing the algae out of the tank. Now once again, if you're doing this pretty regularly, you'll find that it's not really a big job. If on the other hand you haven't done this for a very long time, well, things have a way of getting out of control. So we just go and give that a bit of a... And there's all sorts of phosphate removers and various products that you can use. Now I was using a phosphate remover which was called XP, Algon XP, and it was actually quite good because I was getting nowhere near as much algae when I was using Algon XP. The other thing is the dead leaves and that, you want to try and get them out as well, because any dead leaves break down and release more nutrients into the water, allowing the growth of more algae. Now the other thing I've got floating around here is this fake plant. Now the reason why I've decided to have this fake plant in here, besides the fact it does look pretty crappy, is that there's a lot of live bearers in this tank. And I do often find if I've got some fake plant in the top of the aquarium, when the babies breed, I find them up in the top in the fake plant. So I do like having a bit of that there, just to help help any babies survive, because I've got some pregnant platies in here that I would certainly like to get some babies out of. So once I've gone through and pulled out any algae, I've planted any plants that I've uprooted, then the next thing I'll do is give the filter a clean. So the way that I clean the filter, I like these Aquael filters because they're super easy to clean. All I do is just pull this sponge off, and then what I'm going to do is wash that sponge in water from the aquarium. So I'll just get a bit of water like this, then I'll just wring that sponge out, and then I'll throw that water away, and then I'll repeat that process until the sponge is clean. And I'll clean that sponge, and I'll clean that sponge. If you're having to clean the sponges too regularly, then you either want to use better quality food, like Spectrum's probiotics, or consider getting a bigger filter, or consider less fish. But you want to clean the sponge in water from the fish tank, and if it's dirty like that, you probably want to do it more often. Now you also want to make sure you've got various catfish that will help you out, like this fella in there, which is a flying fox or Siamese algae eater. And if you get the proper Siamese algae eater, this little fella that's hiding there that I can hardly see. He's a great for eating blackbeard algae and stuff. So he's a good little scavenger. Then I've got another little sucker mouth type catfish in here somewhere as well. So having some fellas that are going to help with algae is definitely your friend. Now, the algae is just due to nutrients that are in the aquarium, and the amount of light is going to be a factor here. So if you have a light that you're happy with and you're getting too much algae, you can consider reducing the amount of time that the light's on. Now, I like these LED slim lights because they're completely waterproof, and with these rimless braceless tanks, it's very easy to bump them into the water, and I certainly have had issues of bumping electrical items into water, and that's not a good way to live. So I really like these LED slim lights, but you can consider reducing the amount of time. These ones are probably on too long. They're on about 10 hours a day or more. I'd probably recommend that they're on more like 4 to 6. Sorry, 6 to 8. 6 to 8 is fine, 4 to 6 if you're having an algae problem. And I've also got a fair few snails in here at the moment, so popping some of them out is going to be an advisable thing, because the snails are starting to take over a little bit. And you could put a loach. Now, as far as water tests are concerned, I like to keep the KH at about 2 to 4. The ammonia for 0, nitrite 0, nitrate I try and keep sort of 10. Oxygen, when I keep around 8. Silicate, try to keep it 0. pH, try to keep around 7. Phosphate, try and keep it near 0. Calcium, magnesium, and copper I don't tend to worry about. The only test that you tend to worry about is KH, ammonia and nitrite if your tank's new, nitrate, that'll give you an indication of your water changes, and pH. The other thing that I do test that's in this kit that doesn't come with it, because this is ultimately a saltwater test, is GH. So if you're serious about your aquarium, you really want to get a decent test kit. And I find these ones are really good. But otherwise, if you just bring a sample of water and a little video down to Majestic Aquariums, then we've got a spin test which gets done in 2 minutes, and it's very cheap. Now, I'm not going to say it's the most accurate way of testing water, but just as giving you a quick guide, I think it's really good. So over time, the KH is something that you're going to be looking after, because you don't want that 0. Nitrate's going to give you an indication of water changes. Ammonia and nitrite will give you an indication of how well your filters are working. And obviously keep an eye on your pH, and definitely keep an eye on your GH, because we don't want that to be too low either. So it's a matter of doing something that works for you and doing something that's easy for you. Now, this tank is a very easy tank because I go long periods of time without doing anything to it. So this is definitely not an example of the perfect way to run your tank. Now, you want to use your siphon to go around and suck any waste out of the water that you might be able to suck up. Give the rocks a little bit of a clean, but don't remove too much water because you don't want to shock the fish putting it back in. It's better to change less more often than do a massive change at once. Now, if you're topping up the water because it evaporated, that is not a water change. So over a period of time, you definitely want to be changing some water, even if it's just a little bit a month, because you'll get accumulants build up in the water, which is basically a whole bunch of stuff that we don't really know, can't really test for. So it's good to do a water change. And if your tank's not going well, it's good to do a bit of a reboot, which is a series of large water changes. So once again, if you're topping up the tank, that is not a water change. If you're taking water out, then that is a water change. And I don't recommend changing too much. And also with these rimless braceless tanks, don't fill the water up too much. or you will lose the odd fish jumping out. And somehow it's always your favorite fish that jumps out. Now, if you notice your plant's going a little bit yellow, then you do want to increase the amount of iron-based fertilizer that's going in the water. Now, this particular tank has substrate, which has got a lot of iron in it, but over time that will get exhausted. So therefore, testing iron isn't a bad thing. Or if you notice yellow leaves, then you do want to increase the amount of fertilizer. And if you are getting like blackbeard algae, then you can consider using products like this Easy Carbo. And I find when I'm using the Easy Carbo, the tank definitely goes better. It's fairly toxic chemical, so don't go drinking it or anything silly like that. But yeah, I do. When I'm dosing this, I find I get a lot less algae, definitely the blackbeard algae, and the tank seems to go better. Putting these sorts of things on a dosing pump is a very good idea, because you can get some really cheap dosing pumps that work very efficiently. Whereas when I'm relying on myself to dose products like this, obviously I get the results when I'm dosing, but then if I go through a phase where I'm too lazy, then it's sort of not so good. The other thing about algae is that there's a battle in any aquarium or any pond between algae and bacteria. So there are lots of very good bacteria supplements that you can consider using. And these bacteria supplements definitely help to give the bacteria an edge over the algae. Because if you're allowing your algae to win, then you'll get algae, whereas there are a lot of bacteria supplements which you can just chuck a bit of this in, and then that good bacteria goes in and really competes with the algae for the available nutrients. So that's about it. That's a full service for me. So just doing a bit of a recap. I like to look at my fish, make sure they're all healthy. I'll give the fish a little bit of a feed them a mix of pellets. In here there's some New Life Spectrum probiotics, and there's a couple of different sized Danichis. And I'll feed these fish probably about 3-4 times a week. Just go watching their bellies, and if they look a bit fat, I feed them a bit less. Then I will just give the glass a little once over. I've got various products I use for the glass. Sometimes I use that little cloth. Sometimes I use that. There's also magnets and all sorts of things you can use. So I give the little glass a clean every few weeks. I'll give the filter a clean in tank water whenever I can be bothered, or mainly when I look at them and I think, oh, geez, that really needs doing. Giving it a trim. Some scissors is a good idea. Then using the little tongs to go and scoop out any dead leaves or algae, or replant any. Because even things like having that to pull out your algae or dead leaves, it's got to be lying right next to the fish tank. Because if you've got to go get it, you'll find that you just never do it. So it's really, really important that you have your tools really readily available. They've got to be well and truly in arm's length. Then I turn my light on and off. This light tends to be on way too much. And this tank is a perfect example of do what I say, not as I do. Because once again, this tank gets very little maintenance. And working in the aquarium industry all day, I actually really enjoy coming home and watching my fish. But pretty good at not doing much to look after them. So anyway, that was everything that was involved. And once again, for your tank, if in doubt, grab your phone, make a little video, let us see what's going on with the tank, and bring a little sample of water down to see us at Majestic Aquariums, and we can advise you. And if you want to take it seriously, just get a good test kit. It's very, very easy and very, very forgiving.